Episode 18.
Welcome to the Live Fit podcast with your host, Glenn Johnson. Today you will learn techniques for permanent weight loss and improved overall health.
Ah, yes, it is time once again for the Live Fit podcast. I am Glenn Johnson, and this is episode 18. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Buddhist Boot Camp's Timber Hawkeye. I really enjoyed his conversation. He is a very unique and interesting individual, and I think you will really get a lot out of this conversation. If anybody adopts even one bit of his advice on his mindset and his perspective of looking at life and dealing with certain adversities and just sort of dealing with the troubles of life, I think you will be much, much better off. I'm going to do my best to sort of adopt his philosophy into mine a little bit better. Something that I'm working on. We all have to work on something, and that's what I'm going to be working on. Timber shares with us how his path of life went from being a chubby teenager to becoming a stripper to then working in a fluorescent lighted cubicle office. And he later sold all of his possessions when he got sick of that. He moved to Hawaii, flat broke, but out of debt. He did that for a while, then moved into a monastery for a couple of years, and finally decided to leave there and publish a book. He had been writing letters to all of his friends during his journeys in his path, and he put them all together in a book, which is called Buddhist Boot Camp. His book was wildly successful, and Timber's going to tell us a bit about it on this interview. He's going to share with us the powers of gratitude, the choices in life, toxins, and how to overcome adversity. Timber's a really exceptional person, and I, once again, am honored to have had him on the show. It was a lot of fun. I hope you get out of it half as much as I did. But first, I'd like to give a shout-out to two people who left me 5-star reviews on iTunes. The first one is an update from Casey. Now, Casey originally said that I sounded like Mr. Rogers, and I made a little comment about that, and this time they wanted to clarify that it was a compliment that I sounded like Mr. Rogers, at least a little bit. I think I said at the time that it's probably because I make sure I over-enunciate or clearly enunciate the words, because I know a lot of times people are listening to the podcast with earbuds while driving, biking, running, in the gym, mowing lawns, and I listen to podcasts at 1.5 times, and sometimes when people talk really fast and they slur their words or blend their words together, which might be normal conversation, it doesn't always come across very well at an increased speed. So that's why I make sure I enunciate. And also, I'd like to thank Casey for upgrading my 4-star review to a 5-star review. Another comment was that they wanted to hear an interview from a vegan. And I did send out a couple of requests to the vegans that you had mentioned that you had suggested, and haven't heard back from them yet, but I will keep trying. And if there's anybody else you would like me to reach out to, please let me know. I will be happy to. I would like the diversity of having a vegan on here. I had Dr. Lauren Cordain, who's one of the founders of the Paleo Diet. I had Dr. Barry Sears, who is the Zone Diet, which is an omnivoric diet too. So having a vegan or a vegetarian would kind of add a nice balance to the program so far. So I would like to get a vegan or a vegetarian on here also. Also, Aloise Burt left me a 5-star review and said, "Very informative," and I quote, "I really enjoyed listening to your podcast. I like that you have different guests in every session to discuss the topic you are presenting that week. I usually listen to your podcast while going for a jog or drive. I find it very informative, and I like the diversity of topics you discuss and all they relate to wellness. Keep it up." Well, thank you very much, Aloise, and I really appreciate it. If anybody else wants to leave me a review, I will be happy to mention your name on the show, and thank you semi-personally. You can sign on to iTunes or Stitcher Radio to leave a review simply by typing in livefitonline.net/iTunes or /Stitcher. Also, there's going to be complete show notes available for this episode and all other episodes at livefitonline.net. And if you would like to reach me directly, my email is Glenn, that's with 2 N's, glenn@livefitonline.net. So if you have anything you'd like to say to me personally, any questions, any answers, any suggestions for a future show, you may reach me that way. Once again, livefitonline.net is the place to find everything about this show, me, and there's also a lot of blog articles that you might find interesting. And now it's time for the answer to last week's question of the week. The question was, when doing cardio exercise, the best way to burn more calories is to A, stay in your fat burning zone with low intensity exercise. B, use hand or ankle weights to add intensity. C, exercise at a higher intensity. Or D, exercise on an empty stomach. Well, there is not one right answer. There's 2 wrong answers. That would be the first one and the last one. Exercise on an empty stomach is a big no-no. We don't want to do that, mostly because we haven't eaten in a long time. The body is going into starvation mode. Let's say first thing in the morning, you exercise. You definitely want to eat something before that because you haven't eaten in 8 to 10, 12 hours maybe, and your body is running off of its supplies, and you might think, oh, that's great, it's going to be burning fat. But the trouble is it's not. It's actually using muscle. Because I've mentioned this before, but the muscle is the most expensive metabolically on your body and the least important. Yeah, you might think fat is less important, but the body can live a lot longer time if it's burning less energy. So it's going to save the fat for last. So what we want to do is tell our body that food is prevalent. We don't need to store fat. We don't need to burn muscle. We want to eat first thing when we wake up. It doesn't have to be a big old meal. It can be something as small as a half a banana or a little small glass of milk, whatever suits you, but put something in your stomach with calories. It could be a latte. Yay! A lot of people love it when I say that. So we definitely don't want to skip breakfast, and we certainly don't want to work out on an empty stomach. Once again, a small amount is fine. That's enough to tell the body that food is prevalent. Secondly, the first one says, stay in your fat-burning zone with low intensity. Well, that's a bunch of bull, because there really is no such thing as the fat-burning zone. In fact, I wrote an entire blog article about it last July, and you can find it at livefitonline.net/blog. Just do a search for the fat-burning zone. I will leave a link in the show notes for that very article. Now I'd like to introduce Timber Hawkeye from Buddhist Boot Camp. Timber! Well, I have on the line with me today Timber Hawkeye. He is the author of a book called Buddhist Boot Camp. He also has a website. He's been on TEDx. He's quite a eloquent speaker after having watched his talk on TEDx. And I would like to speak to him today about how his philosophy and Buddhism can work into a person's overall general health and fitness. Timber, how are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful sunny day up here in Portland. You're down in SoCal?
I am.
It's probably the same down there, right?
Yes.
So I would like to start off by giving a little background, or having you give us a little background of yourself, and then sort of work into what you're doing now and how you got there.
In a nutshell, the shortest version I could encapsulate the journey into, I was working in the corporate world, and I witnessed one of the other paralegals at the law firm celebrating her 30-year anniversary, and the fact that she was celebrating 30 years in a cubicle terrified me. And I realized that if I don't get out of that world right away, that would be me.
Yeah.
So I sold everything I ever owned and moved to Hawaii without any place to live lined up, without a job lined up, without any money saved up, but no debt. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew what I didn't want to do.
Right.
And that included working under fluorescent lights and just ending up existing instead of living. So when I did this, my friends asked that I keep in touch with them. And I started sending them monthly emails to let them know what's going on with me. And I got a job working only 15 hours a week. And that afforded me a lot of time to focus on what I really wanted to focus on, which was studying both religion and psychology simultaneously, because I was more interested not just so much in what people believe, but why they believe what they do. What gets us to accept certain truths, reject others, what motivates us. And it's been a very interesting journey to understanding why people do what they do. So
Right.
I started sending them these emails that the more I studied, the deeper in meaning they became. And after about 8 years, my friends convinced me to take these emails and make them available publicly on a blog. And that blog eventually turned into the book that we have today. It is just a collection of those emails, journal entries from throughout my life. That's why every chapter is only about a page long, because it was just an email. And they're not written in any order necessarily.
Right.
So that's kind of brought me to where I am. I was born and raised in Israel, and I moved to the US in high school, not speaking a word of English and never having been exposed to all these different cultures and religions. So luckily, instead of getting judgmental, I got very curious. I wanted to know why and how come about everything. And I'm still quite curious. I ask a lot of questions. I think that's what I do more than anything else. I want to understand so much of why we are the way we are, and it's quite fascinating what you find out or what you think you know.
Yeah, for as puzzling as the body is, the mind is 1,000-fold more confusing and complicated. Just when you think you have somebody figured out, they do something that they can't explain. And I have young children, and they'll do something that was just ludicrous, and I'll ask them why. And I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's not that big of a gap, and there's a certain connection between the body and the mind. And especially in your field, I'm sure you would love to unravel some of these disconnects. When the mind says one thing, but our behavior says another, and how do we bridge that gap between our beliefs and our actual behavior in the world?
Exactly. That's a great topic. I studied psychology in college, and I only minored in it, so I was dabbling in the thought of going into it as a profession. But it really, really opened my eyes on people's behavior, my own and my family and my friends. And not that I'm anywhere near an expert on it, but it certainly enlightened me a lot, and it has helped with my clients.
Absolutely. Yeah, especially, so you've dabbled into cognitive dissonance and understanding how we justify behaviors.
Yeah.
So it's definitely worthwhile to study it. Absolutely.
And I'm constantly working with students and clients who are attempting to quit smoking. And, I say, well, it's not good for you, right? And they say, yes, I know that. And I say, when you started, you knew it wasn't good for you, right? And they said, yes, I knew that. And I say, so why did you start? And their answer is generally some version of, I don't know. Some version. Sometimes to be cool or because my friends were, but essentially they don't know.
Yeah. And I find that more conducive is not necessarily to ask them, why did you start, but why are you still doing it? Because that's where the dissonance gets in. That's where a new thought is introduced to justify a behavior that we otherwise know isn't good for us. And because the mind can't rest with two opposing thoughts. We have to give it something to rest with. And so we say things like, oh, well, it's not cocaine, or, I don't eat as much when I smoke and obesity is a problem. So really, this is just the better of two evils, or whatever reason we give ourselves has to be introduced, or our mind would be stuck with two opposing thoughts. Smoking is bad for you, and I smoke 2 packs a day. And so a new thought is introduced, and that's why they started, why we did things 5-10 years ago. Yes, one method of therapy is definitely to go back and unravel the reasons. Another method is, forget the past. Let's focus on today. What can we change today? And that's definitely my approach. And I think that's kind of the boot camp in the boot camp is start now. Start. It's what you've done in the past, and the things that have happened in your past are in your past. and they do not have to define who you are today. You get to do that right now, and that's very empowering.
I love that. That's a really good point, and that could certainly be used with smokers or drinkers. And in my line of work, it can be used with eaters and non-exercisers.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I've heard that before, where somebody will say, "Well, I've never been an exerciser." Well, okay, so let's do something about that.
Yeah. We're not what we have done. We are who we choose to become, and that's such, to me, an invitation. Moment by moment, we can change that. People say, "Oh, well, I can't help being angry. I've always been angry," or "Everyone in my family is angry," or it's like, you can break that cycle. That's not a valid excuse, so to speak. It may be why you've accepted it as part of yourself, because doing so may be easier than working with it, but it does not explain why you are the way you are today. I don't buy that.
That's great. Those are words of wisdom, and that's why I wanted you on here. I knew you would be able to just kind of cut to the chase and tell us the obvious, because we can really become who we want to become, and we can change. Someone's been overweight their entire life and they're 30, 35, 40. Well, so what? What's the rest of your life going to look like?
Absolutely. And that's really the invitation, is to, yes, like you said, we can become whatever we want to become, but a lot of us are very unclear about what that is. We quite often want to emulate somebody else. We want to look like somebody else. But the goal, the intention is so far away from us that it seems so unattainable, which stops us from even taking the first step. So my invitation is always to, instead of try to be like somebody else, take out a piece of paper and a pen, write out a paragraph, the kind of person that you want to be. Not your beliefs, not, to the T of what you want to weigh necessarily, but what kind of person do you want to be? Write it out. What are your values? And then cross-reference that with your behavior and see, is my behavior in line with my values? Am I actually on that journey to being this most incredible version of me that I can imagine? And that's a great invitation, because no one else is telling you what you should or should not do. You're inviting yourself to step up. And that, nobody likes being told what to do.
No.
Which I'm sure makes your life really hard, because they hire you to tell them what to do, because the voices in their own heads tell them to do something else. So they need that counter. But
well, it is really interesting, because they hire me to tell them what to do, because they even tell me what to eat, tell me what to do, and I'll do it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they don't like being told what to do, but they would rather somebody else tell them what to do than themselves. Mm-hmm. And if that makes sense, it's like I said, it's all very convoluted and complicated, and one person's one way and another person's another way. I have one client who likes me to almost put her down, not quite insult, but say, I don't think you can do that. And then she'll step it up. If I give her praise, then she just stops.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of your job, is you get to duck and dive around these different personalities, because there's no one regiment that's going to work for all of them. So you find out, people always ask me about meditation. What's the best way? And I'm like, well, it's the way that works for you. Like, I can't tell you what's going to work. It's like learning, as I mentioned to you earlier, I learn visually. So for some person to sit there and look at a blackboard all day works just fine. They can read a textbook and walk away all the wiser. I'm an experiential learner. I'm visual. I need to see it, feel it, and experience it before it can actually sink in. So, we have to, change in the way in which we deliver the message. And that's why I'm so grateful that there are so many messengers out there. The message is quite often always the same. It's the delivery of that message that changes. And I'm under no impression that, my book, for example, says anything new. It doesn't, spoiler alert, there's nothing in there you don't already know. It's just delivered in a different way that resonated with me, for example. I didn't use any difficult terminology. All the chapters are only a page long. Everything is just straight, like you said in the beginning of the interview, straight to the point. It's
just sort of a brain flow. You just had a thought on your mind and you just sort of let it come out and that was it? Is that how it happened?
It was,
Mind
how
dump,
did
if
it
you will.
happen? It was, I think every chapter started out as, 10 to 15 pages long. No one's ever going to read an email that long.
Right.
And I know that it was that long because as I was writing, it kind of came to life and it made sense. But the journey to the epiphany, for example, does not need to be spelled out, but the conclusion needs to be applicable to as many as possible. So the details don't need to be there. If a story is too detailed, a lot of people won't be able to relate to it, because then it would just be classified as, oh, this is true for you because of your experience. But if you just take the lesson that was learned or applicable and leave out the details, people can apply it to so many different situations. And again, like with what you do, the intention is to be on a journey and get started, even from today, on a weight loss program or on a muscle toning program or just strength and endurance, and being on that journey is the most difficult part. It's, it's like losing weight is easy. Maintaining the weight off is the hard part. So that's, as that's.
Yeah, that's something I don't share with everybody right away, because everybody thinks losing weight is the most difficult thing, when in fact maintenance is much more difficult.
Absolutely.
But you're also able to handle it better if you've lost weight the right way.
Yeah, which is why I think, and this applies to everything else. If you go about anything gradually and you actually start witnessing and experiencing the benefits from whatever, the exercise, the meditation, the letting go of negativity in your life, whatever it is, if you regularly check in with yourself and say, well, how am I feeling today? And you say, well, I'm feeling much better than I did yesterday. Then, even after you've lost the weight, you don't even have that urge to go back to the way you were because you feel so much better.
Right.
But you have to be able to raise that level of mindfulness and awareness that the hard work that goes into it is so worthwhile. And
how do you raise that level of mindfulness, awareness, body awareness, and connection?
Oh man, I focus a lot on gratitude. I think by giving ourselves credit for how far we've already come, for where we are, is really important to not look so much on how much farther we have to go, and just give ourselves credit for how far we've come and be grateful for what we do have, for what we are able to do. A lot of people, for example, want to lose weight, but perhaps have had a back injury that makes it that much more difficult for them to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And someone else may not. And so, okay, then I'm grateful to have the opportunity. I'm grateful to have this great personal trainer. I'm grateful to have, functioning lungs and a beating heart, and for waking up this morning, and for a support group, and for a health food store down the street. And the more you feel so rich because you're listing all the things in your life. The alternative is this, thinking about everything you don't have and how much longer you still have to go. And your entire approach to life is so different if you approach it from a place of gratitude. You feel empowered, you feel strong, you feel ready to face whatever comes. But yeah, you know how it is. If you just list all the things that are missing from your life and how many more pounds you still have to lose instead of how many you've already lost, it's that ever transparent dangling carrot in front of us that we'll never get to. Especially here in the U.S., we're entitled to the pursuit of happiness.
Not entitled to everything.
But not happiness, mind you. It's in our language. We're not entitled to happiness, just the pursuit thereof. And that's so discouraging.
I have never thought of it that way, but you're right. We're entitled to the pursuit, but we never seem to achieve it. Some do, of course, and they seem to have this magic key. And I really wanted to ask you why people tend to focus on the negative more than the positive. Not to say that you have all the answers to everything, but gratitude's great. I'm totally with you. I'm on board with you. I understand it. I've used it. But I've also been victim to being trapped to focusing on the negative and not seeing the positive things around. So how can you, me, other people find the gratitude and the positive in their life? And keep it. I mean, it's easy for me to sit down right now and I'm having a good conversation with you. I'm looking out my window and it's beautiful and sunny out. But what about tomorrow and next month and et cetera?
Especially in Portland.
Yeah, it's going to be gray eventually.
And that's a really interesting thing. The idea that the negativity is inevitable. I just don't see it that way. I don't know if I just have a different vocabulary with which I define my life, but gray is not bad. Overweight, is not bad. Eating ice cream is not bad. I don't label these scenarios.
Unless it's perceived as bad. Exactly.
And so it has a lot to do with the people we keep around us. It has a lot to do with the internal dialogue in our head. As we look at a situation and we judge it, good, bad, right, wrong, instead of just saying it is what it is. And the question I ask almost everybody, regardless of what it is that they're being challenged with or whatever it is that their practices are, is, how's that working out for you? And that's it stops you in your tracks, because someone says, well, I do this and I do that and I protest against this and I'm angry about this and I hate my boss and I hate this and I hate traffic and I hate commuting and I don't like the weather. And I just go, well, after each one I ask, well, how's that working out for you?
Yeah.
And quite often, well, they're like, it's not. I'm like, then stop doing it. And it is that simple. It's, my dad told me a joke growing up. He said a guy goes to the doctor and says, Doc, every time I drink tea, my eye hurts. Every time I drink tea, my eye hurts. And it's because he left the teaspoon in the teacup and he poked himself in the eye every time he took a sip. And that, I just always go back to that. Most of our suffering is self-inflicted. And we tend to want to put the blame on somebody else. We look for something else that caused us to lose our temper, to gain weight, to be upset, to be stressed. It's somebody else's fault. My invitation is to go, okay, don't point the finger away from you. Look within. How did you contribute to this situation? Not in a way to punish yourself, but to empower yourself to change what it is that's not working. And there's a chapter in the book called Life is a Piece of Cake.
Yeah.
And it's a lot about to do with looking at your life, looking at whatever you're struggling with at the moment, and going, okay, if it's a piece of cake and it tastes bitter, there's something in it that's not working for you. What we tend to do, especially here in the US, is try and find things to put on top of it, put more frosting on top of it, add more sugar, add more whatever, whipped cream, whatever you can imagine, to make that bitter taste go away, to drown it out. And we do that with alcohol, we do that with whatever it is that we can mask our struggles with in order to make them go away. But it doesn't make them go away. Your cake still has that bitter ingredient in it. It just has a bunch of chocolate on top. Yeah. So my invitation is to stop it with the chocolate for once. Look at the ingredients. What is in your life that is detrimental to your ultimate, not goal necessarily, but to that paragraph of living in line with your values? And whatever that is, take it out. People ask, do you think the Dalai Lama would lose his temper if he was stuck in traffic? And I'm like, I don't think so, because the problem isn't traffic. The problem is impatience. And if he has patience, then it doesn't matter if he's in traffic or standing in line at the post office, because the problem isn't outside of us, it's inside. So the work has to start from inside. And that's the invitation, is to step within and go, okay, I am responsible. And that's a hard thing for people to admit, is to say that I'm responsible. And so they look for other things to blame. And I think that's why, in a very roundabout way, and I'm sorry it took me so long to get to answering your question, it's so easy to point out the negative, because you have all these people to blame and all these circumstances to blame for what's wrong in the world, as opposed to stepping up and saying, I contributed to the problem. Mm-hmm. So we focus on all of that, because those become our allies. Those become our ego boosts to say, well, it's not my fault. I didn't know.
Well, you're saying this, and I totally agree with you. But I'm also replaying some conversations I've had with clients just over the years, and many of them tell me that they don't like their body, and they want to exercise, they want to lose weight, they want to tone and firm and shape and sculpt, and also get rid of excess body fat so they look better.
Mm-hmm.
Any words of advice that for me to when somebody tells me they don't like their body?
Yeah, well, it's funny. There's a chapter in the book called Insecurities, in which I specifically talk about that. When I moved to the States, I didn't know anything about fast food, and I very quickly became infatuated with it. And I gained a lot of weight, so much so that I failed PE, physical education, in high school.
Wow.
And I remember my mother making a comment about how chubby I was getting. And it hurt really bad. And I vowed right there and then that I was going to be a stripper. Because in my mind, mind you, I'm 17 years old here, right? And I'm thinking the only way I can overcome this is if people pay me to take my clothes off, then that must mean I'm no longer this unattractive, pale, chunky kid staring back at me at the mirror. That's the only way I can validate that I'm no longer at this place. And true to form, I went out, and I remember that it's all in the book. I got this ab roller. I don't know if you remember that back in the early 90s, the big. And that's what started it out. And sure enough, by the time I was, I think, 18, 19, I was a stripper.
No kidding.
And no kidding. And the more I went into it, at one point my biceps were bigger than my head. I had these huge pecs. I was triangular. I was tan. I was fit. The problem was the pale white fat kid was still staring back at me in the mirror. It didn't matter that people paid me money to take off my clothes. The problem in the first place was that I didn't accept myself the way I was. And that problem never got solved. All I did was change my physical body, but I never changed my mentality. So I'm not saying that we should all just accept necessarily our obesity and say, that's just the way I am. It's saying, who is responsible and what do I want to do about it? And the goal isn't to drop down to 165 pounds. It's to be on a journey to be okay with where we are, whether it's 5 pounds lighter this week, only 2 pounds lighter the next week, whatever it is, but to just enjoy the process rather than say, I will not be happy until ... That's the problem with the concept of the pursuit of happiness, is that it puts happiness at a point somewhere in the future. Happiness is not out there. And it doesn't matter if you say, I'll only be happy when I drop under 200. Because trust me, you'll drop under 200 and then you'll say, well, I won't be happy till I get to 180. And you'll get to 180 and you say, well, I won't be happy till I get to 160. It's a never-ending vicious cycle because we keep pushing happiness out into the future. It can actually be available to us right here and now. Mm-hmm. And it's up to us. I'm sorry that I keep having to say this, and I'm sure your listeners are going to be just as upset that there isn't some easy go-to pill solution to get there. It requires work, and it's more a combination of mental and physical work because, and that's obvious, I think, to anyone. It's not just going to the gym. It's that first, I think the hardest part of working out, of going to the gym, isn't the exercise at the gym. It's the getting out of the house and going there. Yeah. I think that's the hardest part of any workout. Never mind that, as soon as it's over, you're going to be glad that you did it. You're going to feel good. Right. You know this, but that's not quite enough to get you out of bed.
The hardest part about working out is putting on your gym shoes.
Yeah.
And, absolutely. I very much mimic or parallel. Our train of thought is very parallel because what you just said about it being hard work to improve yourself and to accept yourself and to be happy is right in line with what I teach my clients with exercise and with my weight management program. I do not have a quick fix, get slim fast, diet or weight loss program. And because of that, it's not glamorous, it's not trendy, and I don't get a lot of people coming into it, but the ones I do get are ready for change. They're more mature people. They are ready to make the change and accept that, well, maybe I can't eat fried food every day. Maybe I am going to have to get off the couch and take a walk, or at least do some push-ups during the commercial break.
I think what helped me is eliminating the idea that I have somehow sacrificed fried foods, or that I somehow sacrificed eating meat and fast food. I didn't sacrifice any of that. I exchanged it.
Right.
I exchanged it for feeling amazing. I went from failing PE to the athlete I am today. And that didn't happen overnight. And it didn't even occur to me until one day I'm like, I don't recognize myself. This is not me, but it is me. It's an inevitable next step. Is you feel good, you'll start doing more things that feel good, and the deep fried food is not going to even be appealing to you after a while.
No.
Because you're going to associate it with feeling crappy. And you're just not going to want to go there. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And something I say to people a lot is, the less you have it, the less you want it. That goes with sugar or fried food. And the more you have it, the more you want it. And
Absolutely.
I eat, some junk food now and then. I will splurge on some high sugar, high fat, or whatever food now and then. But it's not a regular thing. And most of the time I feel lousy afterwards. And I don't mean mentally guilty, because I don't usually feel guilty about that, because I eat it sparingly and I think about it first, and it's usually okay. And even if it was, let's say, air quote, accidental, fine, I'll get over it. I ate something or too much that I really shouldn't have, but I can fix it the next day by not doing the same thing.
Yeah, and dropping the shoulds. That's a really important thing. Don't should all over yourself. Don't should all over other people.
Right.
It's so detrimental. Even calling it junk food, there's no such thing as junk food. There's junk and there's food.
Right.
And so being really mindful of the language with which we look at the world, we look at our food, and and avoiding the extremes, which is challenging for me to even acknowledge, because I'm so prone to extremes in every aspect of my life, from going to the corporate world and the designer furniture, to living on an island, to living in a monastery, to, it's just from going to being promiscuous to being celibate, it's just like, wow, it's like the pendulum swings. But what it does give me is a reference point. And when I find that middle, that's where I know where to rest, because I get very sensitive whenever the pendulum swings a little too much to one side or the other.
So at what point did you go into the monastery?
What point?
Well, you moved to Hawaii, and you had a 15-hour-a-week job, and you were writing emails to your friends, and so
yes.
You did monastery after that?
I started visiting temples and meeting with lamas and talking and my teachers, and traveling and doing retreats. And the stays got longer and longer. And at one point, I went ahead and moved off the island into a monastery that was actually off the grid. There was no internet, no cell phone connection at all.
Oh, wow.
And that's when my friends hand wrote me letters and said, "We're happy you're happy, but you got to get out of there, man, because we miss hearing from you." And it was interesting. I think we're here to learn to be completely selfless. And when that letter came in the mail, I realized that by being at a monastery, I'm actually doing the most selfish thing in the world. I'm there because I want to be there, but I'm of no use to the outside world.
Yeah.
So I realized that while being there was fantastic and I don't regret going, I wasn't living in line with my values. I wasn't being of service. I wasn't selfless. And so I got out and I moved into another temple. Call it a monastery with Wi-Fi,
Oh, wow.
I think it would be the Buddha's version of the middle path,
Right.
And that's when Buddhist Boot Camp was born. I started putting all this stuff online and making it available, and it just took off from there. Oh. It's been an amazing journey. It's available in multiple languages now. It's very strange how that happened, and I just surf with it. It brought me here to Southern California, and I never know what's next.
Well, that's
And I'm okay
great.
with that. Yeah.
And so is that your main thing now? Is that what you do? Your primary, focus and goal in life and income is your book?
Income. No, I insisted that the book remain affordable to everyone, and so it's a hardcover that's about $10. In
Yeah,
fact, it's like $7 on Amazon right now.
I saw that.
Which is, I don't know how that's possible, because that's less than what I can buy it for from the publishers myself, and I'm the author.
Wow.
So by all means, go get it from Amazon. My intention was never to make money off of this. I lived, when I quit the corporate world, moved to Hawaii, I made approximately $7,000 or $8,000 a year during those 8 years. And I feel still like the richest man in the world.
Wow.
And because it has nothing to do with the stuff that I have. When I was there, everything I enjoyed doing was free. Playing tennis was free. Playing volleyball was free. Reading books, libraries, those are all still free. Take advantage of those things.
Oh, yeah.
Because, there's so much out there, and spending time with friends and teachers and all that doesn't cost anything. Meditating is free, and it is entertaining, believe it or not, because you're watching the mind. It's more entertaining than anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's another part, is realizing that, to answer your question from earlier about these people who say they want to look differently and a better body and all that, we don't just eat with our mouths. We eat with our eyes and our ears as well. We are consumers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just as important as it is for us to say, you know what, I'm not going to eat that toxic food anymore, to make a decision to not eat toxic information anymore. And if everything you're reading and all the TV you're watching and movies you're watching is feeding you this toxic information that you are somehow less than or incomplete or not beautiful, or that you need to lose weight in order to be accepted or loved, that is just as bad for you, if not worse, than deep fried Oreo cookies. It's just when you decide on a new diet, be sure to eliminate those very negative influences from your diet as well, and don't eat them with your eyes and your ears. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me, but that's a hard sell. I've tried convincing people of what they input does affect them. So what you eat affects your body, garbage in, garbage out. But it's the same thing with watching, certain TV shows, a lot of reality shows and sitcoms, and the things you read. It does affect your mind, and it does make a difference. And where do you draw the line? I mean, how can I say this show's okay, that show's not?
Well, I didn't know where to draw the line. So me being prone to extremes as I have been, I just eliminated all TV, all newspapers, all radios, all magazines, all of that. Back in, I think it was 1999, last time I watched TV, Ally McBeal was on.
Holy cow.
And initially that's what I had to do. In a sense, you can call it a detox. I just needed to just stop going to rehab, negative input rehab, and just eliminate it altogether. And yes, initially the only difference I noticed was I didn't have anything to talk to people about around the water cooler at work, because I didn't know what happened on ER the night before. But after a few years of this, I realized that all my thoughts were my own. I wasn't being told what I was hungry for, or what I was craving, or how I should look. All the answers came from within me. And what didn't sit well, I just didn't entertain, like, this isn't working for me, I'll stop doing it. My stomach hurts when I eat this, so I'll stop eating it. It just made sense.
Right.
I would try to go on a hike with friends, and I would be out of breath long before they were. And so I said, okay, well, this is detrimental. My habits, my habitual tendencies are detrimental to my well-being. And so I changed that. Now, where do you draw the line? I think it's different for different people. I think there's just as much positive out there in the world right now. You mentioned TEDx, TED.com. If you want to watch TV, if you have 20 minutes of free time to do something that you don't necessarily want to read a book right now, you just want to go to TED.com. It doesn't matter which talk you watch, you will learn something.
Yeah.
And it's entertaining, and there's hundreds of thousands of them, I think, available. And again, so you're still being, I'm not saying you need to move into a monastery or that you need to sell everything you own and move to Hawaii, although it's quite nice. I'm just saying that find what works for you. And if watching these TV shows or these whatever, I'm not even familiar with them, but I'm sure there's still magazines out there that show, these quote unquote perfect bodies.
Right.
And mind you, I did graphic design and photography for 13 years. I had people come to me and ask to be photoshopped and airbrushed to look different than they do. And I admit I got quite good at that. Mm-hmm. And one day I cross-referenced my job with my values and said, what I'm doing is a form of deceit. I am lying, and this is not in line with the kind of person I want to be. And so I stopped doing it. I think the answer is different for everybody. I know everybody listening to this will know exactly which magazine that is they're reading. Mm-hmm. That's not good for them to read. They'll know. It may not be so easy to stop that subscription or to stop looking at them, but they'll know exactly what show or what magazine or what friend that they hang out with is actually feeding this negative outlook that they have of themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's why I can't tell you, oh, watch this TV show and don't watch that one. You'll know. Every single person out there will know.
Right.
And again, the idea is the personal responsibility. Taking charge of your own life and saying, I'm responsible. I can just say no. Does that make sense? Is that too difficult a task?
For me it's not, and I'm trying to sort of parse it down to a because a lot of people, if they've been kind of smothered with this stuff for so long, have a hard time separating it. Like, okay, I do personal training. People ask me, how many reps, how many sets should I do of this exercise? And honestly, I don't tell them to do sets or reps. I say, do it until you can't do it anymore, as long as you keep perfect form. And I say, you have to challenge yourself. You have to go beyond your comfort zone, or it's not going to do you any good. And that is a difficult answer for some people to really internalize and know when to stop. But I do that because if I say, okay, lift this weight 10 times, they'll do it, and they'll do it forever. But they won't continue to improve because they're doing the same thing over and over. But they're not internalizing it. They're not owning it. They're just following somebody else's directions blindly. I guess what you said there, you'll know it. You might not admit it, but you'll know what stuff you should eliminate, right?
Yeah, and it's important to admit it. And it could be in writing, it could be to yourself, it could be in a diary. Write it down. I think writing it down solidifies it. It's really important to do that. And the way to motivate yourself is, no matter how hard it may seem, think of the alternative.
Yeah.
People say, oh, well, that's easier said than done. And, an easy trek in the wrong direction, an easy trek downhill in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And it is significantly harder than an uphill climb towards euphoria. And so you may take the path of quote unquote least resistance because it seems so appealing, but it's going to take you farther from where you want to be. So even though the alternative route is uphill instead of downhill, it's in the right direction.
Yeah.
So and if you zoom out and you look at the big picture, you realize, I could do this for the next 10, 15 years and end up being miserable, or I could do this for the next 2 or 3 and not just be on the path to euphoria, but be euphoric while I'm on it, because I'm at least headed in the right direction. Again, you're such a visual person. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And before I forget about it, you said something early on, and you were on a roll, so I didn't want to interrupt you, but you were talking about hanging on to the past and how the past doesn't define you. It's where you go in the future. But I wanted to know what your kind of advice would be for people who have a hard time letting go of the past and trusting that they can go forward in the future being different. Let's say an overweight person. They've always been been overweight ever since they were a kid, and they don't know any different. They've tried and failed 20, 30, 40 different diets, and they don't trust that they can actually be a non-overweight person. How do they let go of the past?
It's interesting. A lot of this are these emotional decisions. We are ruled by our emotions, and it's important to distinguish between a feeling and an emotion.
Yeah.
A feeling lasts about 45 seconds to a minute and a half. It comes and it goes. You get angry, you get sad, you get happy, you get excited, and all of this within a 5-minute period. We're bipolar, and that's fine. It's totally okay. It comes and it goes. One feeling leaves and another one takes its place, and that's just how we are. That's fine. An emotion, however, is a feeling that came, but you never let it go. You built a story around it. It's like trying to take a cloud and put it in a jar. And we build a story around this feeling. Somebody upset us 10 years ago, and we wrote a story about how terrible it was and how terrible it made us feel, quote unquote. And and we keep feeding that story, which means 10 years later, we're still going to be just as angry then as we were 10 years prior. Even though that incident came and went, it's gone. That person may not even remember what happened, but it's just as real to us now as it was then because we keep feeding it.
Yeah.
I think realizing first and foremost that whatever it is that was true back then may have been true back then, but it's no longer true today. The thing with truth is that something is true if we choose to believe in it. And if you believe that you will never lose the weight, then you will never lose the weight. I don't know how else to say it. In conversations with God, I really love this concept of if you pray saying, I want more money, you will get exactly that. You will always you'll want more money. You will always want more money. You will create the wanting of more money. You'll never be happy with what you have. But if you say, I'm grateful for the money I have, you'll generate a lot more of it. So part of the thing of letting go of the past stories is realizing you're the one who wrote that story. And that's a whole new, fresh perspective. Like, I'm the one who made that incident mean so much. I'm the one who wrote that story, which means I'm the one who can go back and rewrite it. I can write a new story around it. I have the pen. Does that make sense? We are not victims of these things. Let me think. There's a really good exercise we had during which we had to think back to a very sad moment in our lives and really picture who was there with us when it's somebody close to us passed away, or when a loved one left, or a dog died, or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And all of us in the room, you can see that everyone's posture changed. And some people started tearing, some people started crying. And then we were asked to think back to the happiest moment in our lives, whatever that is. And everyone's posture in the room changed again. Their faces lit up. They started giggling to themselves. And they started thinking back to that really happy memory. And the power behind that exercise is that we were in complete control of how we felt through the power of our thought. We just, Carlos Castaneda said, you can make, what is it? I quote him all the time. You can make yourself happy and you can make yourself miserable. The amount of work is the same.
Aha.
So
nice.
It's perfect for this because we're the ones in control. And that exercise made me realize how in control we are of how we feel. We think certain thoughts, they generate certain feelings. But how many times, Glenn, have you heard people say, oh, I can't help the way I feel?
Oh, yeah.
Or worse yet, you make me feel ... We even put the responsibility of our feelings on somebody else. They made me feel this. Yeah. It's like, no, they didn't. You chose to feel this way.
Yeah.
Eleanor Roosevelt said, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent.
Thank you. I was just going to say that.
Yeah. And I think no one can make you feel anything without your consent. So that ties back into the news or the TV shows or the magazines that we read. If you say, well, this magazine makes me feel fat, well, first of all, the magazine can't make you feel anything. Second of all, you chose to read it and you chose to make it mean that. And the finger just, again, point it back at yourself. You're in control. And it may be tough to give up the subscription to whatever magazine is out there.
Right.
But however difficult giving up the subscription may be, it's much easier than looking at those pictures for another 5 years.
True.
That's the choice we make every single time we buy that magazine. That's the choice we're making, is I'm just gonna keep eating this junk.
And another way to look at it is making change is hard, and letting go of the past might be hard because that's sort of what defines you. But you look in the mirror and you don't like what you see, but are you going to like that in 5 years if you don't change?
Exactly.
It may be hard work. In fact, it's going to be hard work, and it's going to be hard to maintain. But in a year, in 5 years, will you be happy with yourself or mad at yourself? So I think it's worth it, because like what you said, it's the same amount of work to be happy or sad, but which do you choose to do?
Do something today that your future self will thank you for, so to speak. I forget who said that, but yeah.
I love it. I love it. I've really, really, really enjoyed talking to you. I think you have a really interesting perspective, one that I don't hear, unfortunately, all that often from a lot of people. Maybe I don't hang out in the circles that you do, and that might be the reason why. But I have one last question for you before we wrap it up.
Yeah, go for it.
What motivates you to keep fit?
Oh, man.
Stripping?
Those days are long gone, let me tell you. So are those biceps, and so is that 8-pack.
The Zen Stripper. There's a new book right there.
Yeah. No, there's a chapter in the book about this. I'm not kidding.
Okay.
And that's the book is very honest. It's very raw. It's it's transparent, and that's really the best way to go about it, and not, I'm not claiming to be different than anybody else. Mm-hmm. I struggle. We're all battling with the same demons, not coincidentally. And it's really important to recognize that when we do good, we feel good. And when we do bad, we feel bad.
Yeah.
So what motivates me to, I'm a beach volleyball player. I'm a tennis player. I feel good when I do. And if I let myself go, so to speak, if I go a while without it, first of all, I need to not punish myself for that. Mm-hmm. I did the book tour. I was 3 months on the road in a car, driving 8 to 10 hours a day.
Wow.
There was really very little to no time to exercise at all.
Yeah.
And I'm still recovering from that.
Wow.
But that's okay. That's what I needed to do then. And I did it, and I'm glad that I did it. It was fantastic. And I can get back to where I am now. It's not like I ate terribly while I was doing it. I did what I could. And that's really important, is to give yourself credit for what you can do, for what you are doing,
yes,
instead of always focusing on what you can do more. It's so detrimental to always look at the negative, because much like everything else, that's a habitual tendency.
Yeah.
What is Buddhism all about? It's about breaking our habitual tendencies, creating new ones that work for us, that are beneficial. Do what works, and revisit, because what may have worked 5 years ago may not work anymore today. It's just, we're different. We're different bodies. We're different minds. We have different schedules. We have different lives. You have kids, things that you could have done 10 years ago, you can't do now.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't go, well, I hate that I don't look the way I did when I was 18. Well, you're not 18 anymore,
So what does motivate you to stay fit?
Feeling good.
Feeling good. Okay.
Sorry, I know. Long answer, but
you did say it, but it kind of, I was waiting to see if there was something more, and I know you gave a better explanation, but yeah, it definitely, it feels good to feel good.
Yes.
And I like what you said about people striving for perfection, essentially. That's not exactly how you said it, but do the best you can when you can. I was talking to a client earlier today, and he said he couldn't exercise because he was staying in his daughter's house, and there was not enough room. And I said, was there a room for you to lay down on the floor? And he said, yeah, I could have found a spot and moved the kids' toys out of the way. I said, okay, you could have done push-ups. Oh, yeah, okay. And I said, well, and you could have used that same amount of space to do lunges. Oh, yeah, well, so
we can always come up with excuses. That's,
yeah, we could. Yeah. But it is important to just do the best you can when you can. If you can't do an hour workout in the gym. How about a set of 10 push-ups? Boom, you're done. At least you continue on with your habit of exercising.
And that's the habitual tendency that we're trying to birth, so to speak.
Exactly.
Is that you did something. I quite often can't do as much as I'd like to, whether it be exercise or meditation.
Yeah.
I miss the days of sitting for 4 or 8 hours a day. But, with school now, I can't do that.
Right.
But I do what I can.
So, Timber, thank you really very much for taking the time to talk with us today. Where can people find you?
Online, BuddhistBootCamp.com, and mostly on Facebook. I think that's just, with the time restraints, that's the best way to get a hold of us, is BuddhistBootCamp.com. Yeah.
And go out and buy his book, Buddhist Boot Camp.
Yeah, and share it with others. My hope is that for every book ordered, at least 4 people read it. Don't let it sit on a shelf. Keep passing it.
My wife bought it and she read it, so I've read parts of it, but not the whole thing yet. I was looking at the audio version. I almost downloaded it, but because sometimes I prefer audio over reading it. I can do it while I drive. I love podcasts too, and hence why I'm here right now.
There you go.
Okay, Timber. Well, you have a great day, a great life, and hope to be hearing more from you.
Thank you so much. Aloha.
Aloha. Oh, thank you, Timber. That was really great. I really enjoyed that conversation with you. I think you are a really brilliant and insightful person. I love your philosophy. I think we can all learn from it. If it's whether it's just how we see life, include exercise and good eating into our life, even feeling at peace when in stop-and-go traffic. I think your words of wisdom, your insight, your philosophy can really be beneficial to probably pretty much everyone listening to this. You can find complete show notes and leave comments on my website at livefitonline.net or on Facebook at livefitnow. Now it's time for this week's Question of the Week. To avoid weight loss plateaus, it is best to change your program. A, every 6 to 8 weeks. B, every 3 months. C, every 6 months. Or D, never. I will give you the answer to this and much more on next week's Live Fit podcast. If there's a topic you'd like me to cover or anybody you'd like me to interview, please let me know. Thanks for listening. I hope to hear from you soon. And until next week, I hope you live fit. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening for the Live Fit podcast.